Greetings, my name is Patricia and I am 48 years old. I live with my husband and mother-in-law in a well-connected suburb near the train station, offering excellent access to the city center. When we were house hunting, Ethan, who had just been promoted to a managerial position, insisted on a spacious apartment despite the high rent. The extra space seemed worth the cost. Ethan, 6 years my senior and a divorcee, was introduced to me by a friend. His mature, comforting presence was something I had quickly come to rely on. We decided to get married after 3 years of dating. Even when I shared with him my infertility due to past illness, his affection never faltered. My feelings for him remained strong even after I learned about his previous marriage and his son, Willie, whom he had from that relationship. "I'm truly sorry to ask you to live with my parents and son," Ethan had said. "I promise I won't let you suffer. I'll make sure you're happy." To give me space and prevent me from feeling suffocated, he suggested moving to this large apartment where I could have my room. Willie, who was turning 9 that year, would not need much care, especially with his grandmother around to help. After his divorce, Ethan's parents helped with childcare until his father tragically passed away in an accident, leaving his mother to take over as Willie's caretaker. From our very first meeting, Willie had barely made eye contact with me. Initially, I attributed Willie's reserved demeanor to his age and possible shyness, so I didn't let it bother me too much. As long as the family accepted me, I felt content to be a part of their household. My mother-in-law, a woman of quiet elegance, had shown me such politeness during my formal introduction post-engagement that I believed we could coexist peacefully. She had set clear expectations from the start. I'll continue to prepare the meals as usual. Ethan often comes home late, so it's okay if we eat at different times, right, Patricia? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. Let's work well together, she had said. After marrying, I shifted from full-time to part-time at the pharmacy to manage the household chores more effectively. My new schedule meant I wouldn't get home until nearly 9:05 p.m., but dinner was always ready, a small comfort in my solo dining routine. My mother-in-law and Willie usually ate before I arrived, reinforcing a sense of isolation even within my married life. Initially, I wondered if this was all there was to family life, but gradually I accepted this as just our way. Despite our seemingly smooth start, it became clear that my mother-in-law never truly liked me or considered me a part of the family. Trying to build a relationship with Willie, I asked about his school activities. "Willie, the school's activity day is before summer, right? When is it? We're all going to see you, aren't we?" Before he could answer, my mother-in-law quickly intervened. "We'll go there, just Ethan and me, Patricia. You don't need to worry about it." Misunderstanding her intention as considerate, I persisted. "I can get the day off work. Let's all go together." But she dismissed me sharply. "You don't need that. You're Ethan's wife, and Mix's family has always been just Ethan and me." Her words stunned me. That night, I expressed my shock to Ethan, who explained, "Mom's been clinging to Willie. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her." Over time, I managed to join them at the activity day, attempting to integrate as a mother figure, but Willie and I rarely interacted outside of these school events. Sometimes I sensed he wanted to open up, but my mother-in-law invariably interjected, blocking progress. I later discovered she had been tarnishing my image of Willie, suggesting I'd be happier if he weren't in the picture. This revelation deeply hurt me, highlighting the complexities and challenges of blending into a family with pre-existing bonds and hidden resentments. The accusations were harsh. "She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her, too." Hearing such negative things from my mother-in-law must have influenced Willie during his impressionable teenage years. It was no wonder he grew distant from me. The situation was disheartening, and until then, I had never imagined she could be so manipulative. By the time Willie graduated from high school, he was eager to leave. He moved in with his girlfriend immediately and departed for college soon after. Within a year of starting his career, He married her quietly and simply without any formal ceremony. Once Willie was gone, my mother-in-law's behavior took a turn for the worse. Surprisingly, she ceased all housework, which had been a regular part of her daily routine. It seemed as though her new pastime was to find fault with me. She stopped cooking, something she previously took pride in, and would sit at the dining table, waiting for me to return from work. The moment I stepped into the kitchen to prepare our meal, the criticisms began. "You're inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night," she'd scoff. Admittedly, I was never skilled at cooking, mainly because I had relied on her for meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she critiqued every dish relentlessly. "This tastes awful," she would say as she grimaced. "I'm sorry, I'm trying my best," I would respond, only to hear her retort, "You're astonishingly tone-deaf when it comes to flavors, Patricia. It's a good thing Willie never had to eat this." If she disliked it so much, I thought she might as well cook herself. But it seemed her goal was merely to berate me. Her complaints weren't limited to my cooking. She began to nitpick everything I did, from the chores I wasn't accustomed to handling, like cleaning, to the laundry. "Why are there so many wrinkles on the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything?" These jabs at my upbringing were especially painful. She would sigh, looking at me disdainfully, and say, "I don't know how you won over Ethan, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman." And she always concluded with the same hurtful line, "If you hadn't come along, Willie would have never left." I realized that her heart was aching from Willie's absence, perhaps a case of empty nest syndrome. I told myself that if venting her frustrations on me helped her cope, I should just bear it. But her antagonism intensified after a particular event, the announcement of Willie's wife, Teresa, being pregnant. The joy she showed was unlike anything I had seen before. "It's Willie's baby. It's bound to be adorable. He'll be my first grandchild," she exclaimed with genuine happiness. Watching their elation, I found a small piece of joy for myself too. Despite the ongoing challenges at home, the excitement of my mother-in-law over the impending arrival of her great-grandchild was nothing short of overwhelming. The catalyst for her exuberance came when Willie inquired if his wife, Teresa, could have their baby at our place, given her family was an hour away by plane and they lacked local support. My mother-in-law, thrilled to be asked, immediately agreed to help, unable to contain her joy at being needed. Her preparations began almost immediately. Calls from Willie became a daily occurrence, each one sending her excitement soaring even higher. She dove into tasks with fervor, clearing out Willie's old room, organizing the space for the baby, and meticulously planning everything from the nursery decor to the baby supplies needed. She enlisted my help the moment I got home from work. "Patricia, I've taken care of the vacuuming in Willie's room. Could you handle wiping down the floors and the windows, and make sure to wax them too?" she instructed with an air of urgency. "This weekend we're off to buy a crib," she added as if it was the most natural plan for our weekend. Juggling these tasks late into the night after my shifts was grueling. Any attempt to shortcut the process was met with a stern command to start over. It wasn't long before her requests extended to finances. "Patricia, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are a few more things I want to pick up for the baby," she declared one morning. I hesitated, concerned by the rapid pace of spending. Shouldn't we wait for Teresa and Willie to arrive before we buy so much? Maybe Teresa would like to choose some things herself, I suggested, hoping to inject some practicality into the frenzy. Her response was sharp and dismissive. "How can you be so detached? It's Ethan's grandchild after all." "Oh, but of course you're not related by blood. You wouldn't understand, would you?" she retorted, her words laced with accusation. I tried to clarify my position gently. "It's not that I don't care. I just thought it might be nice for Teresa to have a say in her own child's preparations," I explained. My attempt to reason with her seemed to hit a nerve, and she looked at me with a piercing glare. Realizing I may have crossed a line, I watched helplessly as she turned and retreated to her room, deeply upset. I spent that night reflecting on the harsh exchange, feeling the weight of her words. The following morning, she stayed in her room, likely still angry about our conversation. Ethan was about to leave on a business trip and paused at her door to make a final remark. "I'm heading out. Don't dampen Mom's enthusiasm about the grandchild. She's been different since Willie moved out. You've noticed it too, right?" I nodded, but added, "However, if we use up all our funds now, what will we do when Willie and Teresa need our help?" Ethan frowned, misunderstanding my concern. "Are you suggesting I don't make enough money?" "That's not it at all," I quickly assured him, but it was too late. He left, visibly upset, and I was left alone to ponder the delicate balance of family dynamics and financial responsibility. As the one managing our household finances for over 12 years, I considered it prudent to think ahead. Ethan had always reassured me that my part-time income was for my use, so I diligently saved whatever I didn't spend, viewing it as a shared resource for our future needs. The financial stability of our household had been deteriorating steadily. Over the past 4 years, Ethan's salary had shrunk to 2/3 of what it was when we first got married, due to his company's declining performance. Despite the uncertainty about the company's future and his job security until retirement, Ethan was reluctant to look for a new job. He was unwilling to relinquish his role as a department head, mostly to maintain appearances in front of my mother-in-law. As a result, I took on the responsibility of paying our rent, while Ethan managed the other living expenses. We kept this arrangement hidden from my mother-in-law to preserve Ethan's dignity. One day, feeling the weight of recent tensions, I decided to leave work early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I arrived home, she was already seated at the dining table, waiting. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have been too harsh," I began, but she cut me off with her icy demeanor, delivering startling news. "Willie and Teresa are coming back to have their baby here. I need you to move out," she stated bluntly. Stunned, I barely managed to ask, "I have to leave?" She confirmed, "Yes, we don't need another mother figure. You've been redundant for a while now. Willie and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow." Her words hit me like a truck. I had never felt fully accepted by the family, always the outsider. Now, with Willie's return for the birth, it was clear. "Your barren failure," she continued mercilessly. "You were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful for that. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems Ethan is tired of you, too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now." Shocked and heartbroken, I grabbed my bag and left the house, wandering to calm my shaken spirit. I tried calling Ethan, despite my mother-in-law's insinuations. He didn't answer, no matter how many times I dialed. I even called his office, only to find out he had taken a few days off. The suspicions seated by my mother-in-law started to seem more plausible. Overwhelmed with emotion and tears streaming down my face, I found myself in front of the pub near the station, a place Ethan and I used to frequent when we first moved here. It still stood, a relic of happier times. As I entered, the pub owner's face clouded with concern before he recognized me. "Hey, long time no see. It's been about 6 years," I remarked, trying to muster a smile amidst my distress. "Yes, it's been a while. I remember you," he replied, offering a nod of recognition that brought a brief sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of charbroiled chicken?" I asked, seeking a small comfort in this familiar place, a refuge from the storm swirling through my life. As I sat at the familiar pub, I engaged in light conversation with the owner, a man of few words. Sipping my cold beer and savoring the charbroiled chicken, I pulled out my cell phone. The screen lit up, displaying a photo of Ethan and me taken on Willie's 17th birthday. He looked dashing in the slim suit we had chosen together, and I remembered wishing for a closer family bond. The beer seemed to wash down the day's troubles, and as I contemplated my next steps, I browsed for moving companies, finding one available for the next day. I also bookmarked a couple of junk removal services, saving their contacts in my favorites. Changing the screensaver on my phone to something less personal, I felt a sense of mental clarity returning. The meal tasted exceptionally good, perhaps a small comfort amid the chaos. I decided to give the situation more thought once I was back home. As I walked away from the pub, a young waitress hurried towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Patricia?" she asked, noting the screensaver before I had changed it. Confirming my identity, she hesitated before dropping a bombshell. She believed my husband was having an affair with one of their employees. We exchanged contact details and she promised to keep me updated. The pieces began to fit together, validating the harsh words of my mother-in-law. Instead of feeling sad, a fierce anger surged within me. It was time to confront this head-on. That evening, I contacted the moving company and resolved to leave the next day. If there was no conspiracy and my mother-in-law and Willie were indeed plotting against me, I no longer felt obliged to maintain appearances. I packed my belongings relentlessly until midnight. The movers arrived promptly the next morning, and I instructed them to take everything I had purchased, intending to erase any trace of my presence. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my resolve. "I'm taking everything I bought. You can start fresh tomorrow," I declared, barely suppressing a laugh despite her protests. The movers efficiently cleared out my items, leaving behind only the baby gear and her old dresser, things from before my time. "Well then, I bid you farewell. There should be no trace of me left, so enjoy your new life with Ethan, Willie, and his family," I said coolly, leaving her stunned. Placing the keys on the table, I exited the house, the movers following with my belongings. I decided to stay with a colleague temporarily, feeling a sense of completion and relief. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. 2 weeks later, Ethan finally reached out, his voice tinged with confusion and urgency. "Patricia, where are you? Willie and his family are here. Aren't you coming home soon?" "No, I'm not coming back," I responded firmly, recalling his mother's command for me to leave. Meanwhile, the young waitress from the pub had followed through on her promise, sending me a photo of Ethan chatting intimately with another woman at the pub and later entering a hotel with her. This betrayal erased any remaining affection I had for him. Armed with evidence of the affair, I prepared to confront the situation fully, no longer bound by any illusions of my old life. Having had enough, I didn't hesitate to make it clear to Ethan over the phone. "Willie and his family are moving in with you, right?" "I figured as much. I heard they've been struggling financially, hopping between part-time jobs since Willie graduated from vocational school." "No, I want you back, Patricia," Ethan replied, his voice edged with desperation. "I went to the pharmacy and they said you're taking some time off." "Yeah, I needed a break," I said nonchalantly. "But I'm fine, so don't worry about me. Your mom and Willie probably prefer having the house to themselves without me around." My blunt remark left Ethan speechless. He knew all too well that his mother and Willie had never accepted me, but he chose to ignore it. "All right, I need to talk, so I'll come back there," he said, a plea evident in his tone. A few days later, I returned to the house for the first time since leaving. Inside, I noticed new furniture and appliances. Willie and Teresa barely acknowledged my presence, merely nodding from their seats on the sofa without standing. As I sat down, my mother-in-law glared at me with a mix of shock and disdain. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Before I could rush my visit and leave, Willie confronted me. "What are you doing here? You took everything from the house. What kind of monster does that? Dad's been supporting you and you've had it easy." I exhaled deeply, frustrated. "I took everything because I paid for it. I was clearing out all traces of myself just as you all wanted, right?" I countered. "That's crazy. There's no way you could afford all that just working part-time at the pharmacy," Ethan chimed in. Turning to face him, I replied firmly, We've been getting by on what both Ethan and I earn, and for your information, Ethan's company hasn't been doing well. His salary has dropped significantly, and for the past 4 years, I've been the one covering the shortfall. I've been paying our rent. My mother-in-law's face registered shock as she turned to look at Ethan, who awkwardly avoided her gaze. I'm not just a part-timer, I'm a druggist, and the pay is quite good. I make more than Ethan now. The room went silent, the tension palpable. Turning to Willie, I decided it was time for some truths. Since you're going to live here now, it's time for you to start taking responsibility. You'll be paying the rent to help your grandmother. Willie's face contorted in surprise. Rent? How much is it? It's $7,200, I said firmly. Good luck. Since it seems my role here is over, I have no obligation to take care of you anymore. You're going to be a father soon, Willie. It's time to pull yourself together. Teresa, overhearing the conversation, suddenly spoke up, her voice tinged with panic. Wait, $7,200? Weren't we supposed to live here for free? I stood up, ready to leave, satisfied that I had made my point clear. Covering rent and living expenses is part of life. Good luck figuring it out. As I walked out, leaving them to absorb the new reality, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The chapter of my life dominated by neglect and ungratefulness was finally closed. I almost burst out laughing at the absurdity of the situation, but managed to keep my composure. Don't worry, Teresa, there are cheaper places available. Ethan still makes a decent salary after all, I remarked, watching her face relax slightly. Then, with a heavy dose of sarcasm, I added, Oh, and since I'll be leaving, life might still get tough for you, Ethan, especially with your mistress, huh? At that, Teresa's composure broke, and she dissolved into tears. My husband looked panicked. What are you talking about? He stammered. Teresa, through her tears, responded, Oh, your mother told me about the new woman. I guess it's time to end my role as a wife, too. Ethan was flustered. My mother said what? He sputtered, realizing too late that I knew far more than he wished I did. It hasn't even been 6 days since I left the house, Ethan. Wouldn't that hurt Grace if she knew? I mused aloud, and at the mention of Grace's name, Ethan's face went pale, confirming my suspicions. This isn't the right atmosphere to discuss divorce papers, but I'll be in touch about that later through my lawyer, I declared, standing up to leave. Neither Ethan nor Willie could find the words to respond. They remained silent as I grabbed my bag. My mother-in-law, however, stood up abruptly, slamming her hands on the table and yelling with a vigor surprising for her age, What the hell? It's all your fault our home is in shambles. I shot back without hesitation. It was you who told me to leave, you who hinted at Ethan's affair, and you who interfered with my relationship with Willie. Everything was because of you. I felt a rush of anger. I regretted not being more assertive in my relationship with Willie and not standing up to her sooner. Willie has nothing to do with this. Ethan, it's time for you to step up. You're going through a hard time. You should support him as his wife. Take responsibility as a family member, I admonished. What is she even talking about? My mother-in-law muttered, bewildered. If she hadn't called Willie back home, if she hadn't hinted at Ethan's affair, I would still be supporting Ethan in this home. Where are you, Willie? Why are you still here? It's all her fault, my mother-in-law concluded, her lips pressed tightly together, trembling with emotion. I slipped past the silent mother-in-law and quickly left the room. Afterward, Ethan agreed to the divorce rather easily. It seemed my determination and the undeniable evidence of the affair gave him no other choice. Shortly after, it seemed they began the process of moving out of the apartment. In the end, Willie and Teresa returned to their apartment, choosing not to live with the mother-in-law. Ethan appears to be considering remarriage, but Grace is furious over the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I've heard they're now considering what steps to take next. After everything that transpired, my mother-in-law ended up in a care facility. It's somewhat melancholy to reflect on the irony of her situation. After all the dedication she poured into raising her son and caring for her grandson, it seems they are now ready to move on without her. Perhaps, in their eyes, she had fulfilled her role. If my mother-in-law had held her tongue back then, and if it had merely been a simple return home for childbirth, perhaps we could have continued living together even after the divorce. But things unfolded differently. Willie sent me an apology letter recently. In it, he expressed his childhood longing for more affection and explained that he couldn't talk to me freely because his grandmother disapproved. He also shared how pleased he was whenever I attended his school events. Reading his words, I wondered if maybe I should have made more effort to connect with him. Maybe then, our relationship could have taken a different path. Despite the end of our familial ties, I find myself silently hoping for Willie's happiness in life. As for me, I've returned to my job as a druggist and rented an apartment close to my workplace. I didn't feel right keeping the furniture and appliances I had taken from the house, so I arranged for a junk removal service to take them away. Life without the constant criticism and interference of my mother-in-law has turned out to be peaceful and comfortable. For now, I am focused on living for my happiness, no longer beholden to fulfilling someone else's expectations or desires. It's a new chapter, one where I can finally breathe freely and look forward to what comes next.